or path that you're on for the course of the year. So this particular lesson aligns with key idea 1.3. Now, I do want to point out one thing. If you do look at key idea 1.2 right here, it does also correspond to this if you do bring in any aspects of social isolation, or if you do talk a little bit about coronavirus as part of this lesson. And I'll leave that up to you because you understand your students best. But if you are going to be talking about this idea of social isolation, the fact that coronavirus is what's keeping students inside, it would definitely also align with key idea 1.2, which talks about the idea that historical events, right, significant historical events, which is what we're living right now, can be important to American cultural identity. And this is certainly going to also have a shift to that identity as we kind of go through the next several weeks and months. But I'm going to scroll down to key idea 1.3, which is definitely embedded in this lesson. And that is the idea that a citizen is a member of a community or group. Students are citizens of their local and global communities. And we'll talk a little bit about this idea right here, because communities can range from family, right, that immediate group. They can be the table that a student sits with in your classroom. They can be the entire class. They can be school. They can be town. They can be county. They can be across the state, or they can be global. And so you're going to have lots of opportunities to kind of tease that out as you do go through the lesson with students. Key idea 1.4, which you'll see right here, people create a government in order to create peace and establish order. Laws are created to protect the rights and define the responsibilities of individuals and groups. We're living in a great example of that right now. The social isolation, you know, the orders from Governor Cuomo, those are all really speaking to key idea 1.4. And so that's another great touch point that you can engage in with your students. 1.5, the location and place of physical features and man-made structures can be described and interpreted by using symbols and geographic vocabulary. So there is a cartography lesson and a map building component of this unit as well, because one of the things we want students to be able to continue to do is connect to the broader world, even if they are finding themselves spending a lot of time indoors and at home. And the final key idea that this aligns to is 1.6, which is people and communities depend on and modify their physical environment in order to meet their basic needs. And again, that idea that we are living in that moment now. And so your physical environment does not only mean what's outdoors, it also can mean what's in your space that you're in right now. And so we're modifying the space that we live in order to live in these unusual and unique times. I'm going to toggle over to the actual lesson now, and I will walk you through it. Again, I would encourage you, if you do have any questions or wonderings, we will leave time at the end, or you can post them down in the chat. And this is not usually the way that I like to teach this, but again, I'm trying to keep this as abbreviated as possible because I want to respect your time. So I'll talk through the lesson. If you do have a really burning question, feel free to unmute yourself and just kind of jump in. But otherwise, I'll leave plenty of time at the end where we can talk through things. I also do run an online virtual high school as part of my role at PNW BOCES. So if anybody wants to stick around at the very end of this session and talk a little bit about distance learning, online learning, blended learning, virtual learning, which all mean different things, we can certainly do that as well, because I'm happy to stick around and support you in your needs there as well. So within this lesson, right, whose purpose is to be used by teachers and our families to explore key ideas and practices from the New York State Social Studies framework, we've built in a lot of flexibility. And that's the one thing I would really ask you to keep in mind. I know that all of you are being given directives by your districts, by your principals, by your administrators, but really flexibility has to come to the forefront here. And that's us all thinking through an equity lens. We have to understand that, you know, we're all stressed by this situation, and so are our little ones. Families are stressed, and the environment that a student might find themselves in now may look very different. And for that reason, this lesson really could be, from the most basic way, printed out in a packet and mailed to a family, or there's multiple tech components that are built into it, which would allow it to be accessed in a much more technological way. And that's really, again, going to be your call. I would encourage you to give people options here. The more flexibility that we demonstrate as educators and as professionals, the better rapport we're going to develop with our families, who we're going to rely on to do a lot of instruction in the coming weeks. There's 4 of the 6 social studies practices that we identified as being explicitly practiced within this lesson. And those are gathering, interpreting, and using evidence, because again, we're going to ask students to think about their space within a community and to talk quite a bit about it, and also to create some projects based on it. Comparison and contextualization. Again, there's questions embedded here that ask them to think about two things and compare how they look or what they look like. A good example of that would be the maps versus globes section of this lesson. Geographic reasoning, and geographic reasoning has to do with the idea of a student's understanding of the space around them, and beyond their spatial awareness, also recognizing where places are, how to interpret a map, how to look at a map, and how to make inferences off a map. And then of course, civic participation, because this is about community, it's about understanding their role, right? And students are participating in civics right now. You know, as people who are self-isolating, that's a form of active citizenship. So we should point that out to the students, and we should make them feel good about that, because this can be a really, really, really tough time. I'm sure many of you are stressed by this time, but, you know, kind of shining a light and saying, hey, you know, you're doing the right thing to help other people may help to frame some of our students in a slightly more positive way, what they're experiencing. So the overview, connecting students to the communities they belong to is critical at this time. Students belong to many different communities. And again, we talked about this, they range from families all the way up to our big global world. Everyone has an important role to play in community. People in communities have many different jobs. It is the job of everyone in the community to keep everyone else safe. And again, connecting that back to the isolation that we're encountering right now. Helping students to see the link between social isolation, their role in the community, and safety will assist them in understanding the need for social isolation. You know, students are aware, right? The elephant in the room, they're aware that they're home. How explicit parents are being with that could depend. But I think acknowledging the fact that this is because of an action to keep other people safe will again help students to better understand what exactly is occurring right now. Exploring the structures of their community further will help them to continue to connect to the broader world, because again, isolation can be lonely, and we want to try to do what we can to form those good connections and help students socialize as much as possible. So there's a key here. What really applies to first grade is going to be the yellow areas, which are the K through 2 assignments or tasks. These are ones that are applicable to all the grade levels in the way that we designed it. The green, which are grade 1 specific, and then this kind of beigey golden color right here, which are the optional technology components. Again, there is no right way to teach this unit. This could be chunked out over 10 days. It could be stretched further than that. It could be done in a week if you abbreviated it. But again, with that flexibility in mind, we've tried to create a place where there's as much resources as possible so that you can make this fit for your classroom environments. And just a quick aside, if you do have colleagues in the 3-5 grade level band, we are working on that lesson plan. It's going to be focused on human rights and government, and that should come out next week. We'll then probably the next week after that release a 6 through 8 lesson or mini unit, as we're calling them. And then the week after that, we would go back to the K2 band. So I'm thinking that we're going to try to get these out every 3 weeks or so in order to, you know, assist you in these challenging times. So let's go to the first component, which is playing a video, Me on the Map. Me on the Map is a great book. It's an elementary book. It's a book that we would read in our classroom, but we don't necessarily have that ability here. So, you know, if you do have students that do have access to the internet, there is a great reading of it on YouTube. It's embedded within the document, and it reviews the idea that I am within my community and that there are important places within my community. Questions to ask as a follow-up. And we put this questions to ask function in here for 2 reasons. This could be used by you if you are connecting with students virtually. And I will talk about that in a second, that idea of connecting virtually, especially with elementary school students. But the prompting questions are also for parents. If a parent is being expected to teach much of this lesson, you know, parents speak to their children all day long in most cases, but they don't necessarily lead explicit instruction with them. So these are just good questions for them to get that conversation started and try to get information out of their first graders. I wanted to mention a little bit about technology here. So we're going to talk a little bit about tech here. Just make sure that the technology that you're using in your classroom, I know that everybody under the sun is offering free trials of things. You just have to be really careful. There are really strict laws here in New York State, right? Ed Law 2D talks specifically about what kind of information can be gathered by a device or can be displayed through technology. So my one caution to all of you is if you are going to utilize technology with students, that you just make sure that you vet it with your district. If it's not a resource that your district has explicitly approved or has sent to you, just run it by your building administrator or by your district tech person, just to protect yourselves. And the other thing is, I did demo this lesson with a group of second graders a couple days ago, and I had planned on maybe spending 10 or 15 minutes on Zoom with them. They were kids from my daughter's dance class, and it did not go as planned at all. As you can probably imagine, it was about 20 minutes of let's talk about social isolation and the coronavirus. And then it was about 7 minutes of keeping their attention and talking a little bit about the map activity in here. And then I actually read them a couple books, and that was it. So again, as you delve into technology and as you think about how you're going to connect with students, I would say expect the unexpected. And if all else fails, revert back to really basic ways of communication. Sometimes a telephone call is the most powerful way to connect with students, especially at times like this. So number 2 is going to be introduce the concept of cartography or map making. Play video of Know Your Globe and the geography song. Again, if you have a large number of students that do not have any access to the internet, you may have to then create or go into the SSELA platform if you are a subscribing district and look in there for actual resources to send out. This particular lesson is not password protected, and I will post the link. I would assume most of you have already accessed it or looked at it. It's right on the SSELA landing page under the tab of online learning, and it's available to anybody. So you do not have to be an SSELA subscribing district in order to have access to this. We wanted it to be open source. So questions to ask as a follow-up to those map resources. What is a map? Why do people need maps? Where have you seen maps before? This third question is a great question to ask our little ones today, because many of them have never seen a paper map like we would maybe have been used to, finding in our parents' car back in the day. Many of them will make reference to Waze or to whatever comes up on the screen in their parents' car. And those are examples of maps. They're digital maps. They're maps that live in technology. But that's where our students are going to think about and understand in terms of what a flat map would look like versus a globe, which they probably have seen in your classroom. Step number 3 is going to be to model a map of a neighborhood displaying streets, houses, and other community landmarks, such as a firehouse, hospital, school, etc. Again, this can be something that you may have a better example. You may have a map of your community you want to use. We just embedded a very basic map, and I'm not going to open it up. I'm just going to toggle it down. And this map is just a simple grid map. It has a compass rose on it. It has a street on it. It has a couple buildings on it. The only thing that's missing from this very basic map is an explicit key. So you may just want to point that out to students that there is no key on this map, but for the map that we're going to ask them to produce, we're going to ask them to produce that key because that is part of the geographic reasoning practices. And we do want students to be able to show that skill because it has to do with communication. So a key is important because it helps us to communicate and to navigate the pieces of information that we find on a map. So number 4 is the major project embedded within this mini unit. And this is where, again, I'm going to really encourage flexibility. My own children are doing this project now, and it is a hodgepodge of what they've kind of found around the house. We did create a Google map template right here, where if you have a particularly tech-savvy first grader, if you are a Google school and you've played around with Google Slides before, they can actually access this digital template right here. All that you would have to do is go into it. You can't edit the original, but you go in and you make a copy, and then you can edit it, and then you can rename it. And then if you wanted students to send that to you, and again, if they were savvy with Google Slides or if they had a parent who was, they could do it digitally. What I am finding in my thought process here for most first graders, because I think, again, Google comes in a little bit later in the elementary years, using the different apps that are available for it, is this would be a great place to have students do a scavenger hunt and to have creativity, show their artistic talents, think outside of the box. But the way that we framed it, and I'll read through it and then explain a little bit, is using available resources, have students create a map of their community or neighborhood. Maps can be drawn on paper, made 3D, designed on the computer, as we said below, based on what the resources are that are available. Creativity is encouraged here, allows students to engage this component of the lesson as an arts and crafts project would be beneficial. I know a lot of us are talking the language of SEL, social emotional learning. There is a huge therapeutic component to art. And so if students really took this on as an art project, there is that idea that they're going to be physically manipulating things. It's going to occupy their time. It's going to occupy their minds in a way that has value. It's not going to be busy work. It's going to be something that's going to have that therapeutic effect as well. And again, examples of materials could be paper, pencil, markers, tape, glue, toilet paper rolls, old shoe boxes, Legos, blocks, matchbox cars, sticks and twigs if they wanted to make trees. Really opening this up to that creativity. My children's has sticks on it. It has Legos on it. It has Duplo blocks on it. It has shoe boxes for the hospital that's near us. It's just a really, and it's sitting on my entire kitchen table, actually. It's just a really interesting way to watch them process and to see what's around them. And they have spent hours scouring around and looking for pieces for this. So again, we want our students to be engaged. We want them to be limiting their screen time. You know, we want them to be learning. And this is a great opportunity for them to engage in a little bit of learning. And again, whether they have an adult helping them with this, you know, or whether their parents maybe are working from home and they can take a little bit of time to gather the materials on their own, it could be framed like that as well. So it's going to give families a little bit of flexibility in terms of how they dig into this part of the project. We thought that it would be appropriate down here, what the maps should include would be the community name, the places, building locations, all labeled, compass rose, and a key. And again, that's the first part of this project. So the subsequent things that we're going to look at here are like additional components of the project, but you could stop there if you wanted to, or you can do the rest of the ones that are here. There are questions to ask. You know, what is the name of our community? What are the locations, places, and buildings you chose to include, and why? Why would a compass rose be important? So you're going to want to discuss cardinal directions, the idea of being able to orient yourself, you know, north, south, east, and west. And why would a key be important? These are highlighted in this kind of bluish teal because they're second grade questions. Second grade focuses more explicitly on the idea of urban, suburban, and rural. But again, you know, you could use them with a first grader and you could introduce them to that concept that communities or different spaces look very different. Another great optional activity here, community scavenger hunt on Google Earth. I'm not going to open this up, but it's the idea that it allows you to go and look at several different communities and start to see how things look different depending on where you are. And there's a bunch of different communities that are embedded in there all over the United States. And again, that would be a great additional practice that a parent could do with a student if they wanted to look into this a little further to try to understand the bigger, broader world. Number 5 is a fun activity where students are going to take on the role of a tour guide and talk a little bit about their community to someone who's visiting for the first time. So now it's the idea of taking the idea of, I understand what's in my community spatially, and now I'm going to tell you what's great about my community or what I like about my community or the value I see in my community. So asking students, what would they tell the person about their community? What will they show them about the community? What makes your community interesting? This could be done on a single poster. It could be done on several sheets of paper. What we thought for first grade would be appropriate is they could produce drawings of the important places so they can actually go to their own map. They can draw the places on a separate sheet of paper that they had highlighted on their map, and then they're going to write the name of the place on the picture, and then they could write one sentence explaining why they chose it. And again, you know your students. You may have, again, an advanced student who could write more than one sentence. You may have a student who's going to describe the name of the place, but then ask their parent to write down what they verbalize. Again, there's a lot of different ways that this could look. And the one thing I would say, because you live in the middle here, right, in first grade, is that if you do have a student who's struggling, who has a hard time writing or verbalizing, and you think that this may be too deep of a dive to write those sentences, jump down to the kindergarten section and have them do that, right? If you have a student that's advanced, maybe their project's going to look a little bit more about like what the second grade expectations were. But again, just use your judgment and adapt it whatever way you see fit and what works best for you. So then questions for you to ask or a parent to ask as follow-up. Why did you choose to tell the visitor about blank in our community? Can you explain to me why that is important to you? What are the most interesting parts of the community for you? Are they the same for everyone? And again, I know that there's different rules in different districts about, how we're going to be coming together with our students, but, maybe even just saying to the parents that have the possibility of doing it, snap a picture of it on your phone. Let's see what those communities look like. And then just ask your child to write something short, put that in the body of an email, and then they could send that to you. So that's one way that you could actually get to see their communities, and then you could type back to the student and say, wow, that's a great job. I noticed you built the firehouse over there. And again, if you're not able to meet over Zoom or over a similar platform, because your district hasn't approved that, you still would be able to give feedback to the student, because that feedback is going to make them feel good. And it's going to, again, make them feel connected to you because they are missing you. Down to number 6, we're now going to talk about the people within our community. So the idea that community helpers come in all shapes and sizes and forms. Great Brain Pop Junior video to kick it off. Questions to ask. Think about the important places and buildings you put on your map. So again, asking students to go back and revisit that map that they put all that effort into. Why did you include those places? Does it have to do with the people that are in there? Oh, I put a hospital on there, but maybe the hospital is not the important part. It's the fact that there are doctors and nurses and technicians there that keep us safe. Oh, I put the school on there because that's where my teachers are and my classmates are. So the idea of transitioning students' concepts of what's important in the community away from the buildings and the places, the people that occupy them, and having them see that there's real value in the diversity of the community and all of these community helpers. How do different people in our community help each other? And why is it important for different people in the community to help or take care of each other? And again, a great jumping off question to talk about isolation, right? Again, it's the elephant in the room. That group of second graders kind of blew me out of the water that I talked to the other day. All they wanted to talk about was the coronavirus. And their knowledge of it was pretty extensive for a group of 7 and 8-year-olds. So don't underestimate the questions they may ask you. And again, our role in this kind of structure, in this kind of setting, is to, minimize fear, and also just to provide factual, appropriate information that's, appropriate for their developmental level. Step 7 is a great extension to that video, and that's the idea of using index cards or Post-its to go ahead and to label the different people that are within those spaces in their map. So they're going back to that same map again. Now they're creating these little tags on it, and they're talking about the people there. They can draw a picture of the people. Again, for students who do love Google Slides, and again, if you've used it in your classroom, there's a Places and People slide deck right here that Linda, one of our great consultants, built. And again, it does not have to be done this way. This is for technology. If you have a student who's built a physical map, I would say go with index cards, go with Post-its, go with pieces of paper cut up. Go low tech. Again, the responses will vary by grade. And again, you can use this as first grade teachers to say, maybe green is grade level specific. Orange may be developing learners. Teal may be advanced learners. But the idea of just asking students to then look at the place, create these little description notes. So for example, fire station, firefighter. That may be all that a kindergartner does. If we can get them to write that, that would be great. We want to continue the development of those fine motor skills as much as possible. And then the parent or you can say, hey, why did you choose that? If the parent is the one saying it and the kid says firefighters keep us safe, parent goes in and scribes that underneath, and then they stick it onto the firehouse on their map. So again, that idea of connecting people to the community and to those physical spaces. First grade, basically the same idea, maybe ask them to label a few more places and maybe have them scribe their own sentences. Second grade, label the same number of places, but asking them to write something more sophisticated. So if you have a student who's a strong writer, right, and who's creative and you think can connect these ideas, maybe you have them write 2 sentences. So, firefighters rescue people, put out fires, even visit us at school. Fire trucks are kept at the fire station. That may be an appropriate response for an advanced first grader. And the follow-up questions here, can you tell me about the descriptions you added? Can you take me on a tour of your community? And that should really be kind of the culminating activity. So whether that's occurring with you or whether that's occurring with the parent, really allowing the student to walk somebody through it, and to show off their work. And again, help them to make those good, strong connections to understanding those spaces around them. The optional extension activity, and again, this would be a great activity for a family to dive into if they have the available time right now, but it's the idea of, okay, so I am isolating right now. That's an example of what we call action civics, which is me doing something positive to benefit my community. But now that I understand that my community is broader, just beyond maybe my home or my neighborhood, are there things that I can start thinking about in the future that I might want to engage in, to better my community or to better the lives of those around me? So going to a soup kitchen, you know, picking up garbage, as our parks hopefully begin to open in a couple months, thinking about the work that's going to need to be done in them to get them, you know, ready for our students to be able to enjoy them in the summer. Any of those examples could be things that students could even start to think about, and whether they operationalize them or not, or whether they just have that conversation with their parents, there's going to definitely be real value in it. I would encourage you to think about books that you have built around community. And again, whether you're going to, you know, record yourself and share those out with students, think about really good resources that you may have available to you that could augment any part of this lesson. And again, there's no right or wrong way. I've gotten emails back and forth. How many days do I spend on this? The answer is, I don't know. It really depends on what your students need and what you need. It really depends on how you had budgeted out social studies this year. I know that up until we went on this extended break, you know, ELA and math testing, you know, was kind of in everybody's minds, at least in the second half of elementary, not so much for you, but was in the second half of elementary's minds and was in the middle school minds. But I think that we also, even as early teachers, K through 2, right, we oftentimes tend to go with math or ELA as being kind of the dominant pushes, with then STEAM coming in, and then social studies kind of comes in after that. But in the moment we're living in now, it really is important that we're explicitly teaching social studies, because those 6 practices that are embedded in the framework are going to help our little ones to better understand the situation that we currently find ourselves in. So that's just my thought process on that. I'm going to stop sharing at this point and go back to our bigger group. And I'm going to open it up to any questions that anybody might have. We have nothing in the chat, and we have no hands raised, but does anybody have any questions or thoughts with all of this? And I know it's a Thursday afternoon, and I know that it's 3:30 as well, and I'm living with you in that. And I know that it's been a busy week. So what I'll do right now, oh, we got something in the chat. Oh, thank you. That's nice. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put a couple links into the chat that I would ask you to just take a quick look at before you do leave. The first link that I'm going to put up here is the link to our PNW BOCES landing page. And again, you can access these lessons by going right to the SSELA landing page and then accessing online learning. And any resources that we have going forward, we will also put directly onto that page. So it'll always be in that same spot for all of you. So that's that. And then I do want to let you all know, because as elementary teachers, you are masters of all crafts. PNW BOCES, we have the infrastructure in place where we're going to continue to offer a pretty wide variety of what we call PL on the go. We're scheduling at least 4 professional learning sessions. They're completely free. And we have really high quality presenters coming in over the next several weeks. Greg Tang is a great example of that. He's one of the foremost math minds right now. He's going to be presenting on Monday. Linda, who I mentioned before, who's one of our social studies consultants, is going to actually be doing a presentation also on Monday, focusing in on using technology in the classroom and in these kind of unusual circumstances. And on Monday, we're going to also have 2 of our consultants who work with me on our online high school. We're going to talk about deliberate design of lesson plans during these times, and how you can really break down a lesson into 4 parts and how even for a first grade classroom, just kind of doing the same deliberate steps every day in terms of delivering instruction are going to help our students to better understand. So that is the link that I'm going to pop in there right now. So if you go to that pnwboces.org PL on the go, it has the current week's schedule, but by tomorrow afternoon, myself and Greg Brown, who is my partner in crime, are going to put up next week's schedule. And again, there's 4 different offerings. They all utilize Zoom, and we are also recording all of these. So there's also going to be a link starting next week to all of the professional learning we're offering so that people can go ahead and access it on their own time, because we know how crazy things are in our own households, and how you're trying to balance being a teacher, being a spouse, being a parent, and just managing your own social emotional needs at this time. And we're here for you. So again, if any of you need anything, I'm going to put my email down here as well. You can feel free to reach out to me. And you'll also notice, she's also probably up on your screens, Jessica Viale, who is my teammate at SSELA. If any of you have ever called with password reset questions or emailed, Jessica is the very nice person that you find on the other end of the phone. And she's also here to assist in any way possible. But again, we just really appreciate everything you're doing for our students. You know, educators at the end of the day are going to be remembered as being heroes in my eyes. I'm a big Hamilton fan, and the line, "History has its eyes on you," kind of comes to mind when I think about the role that you're all playing here, because you are learning in this time as well and continuing to deliver instruction, and the work you're doing is super valuable, and keep fighting the good fight for our kids. So we'll end the session now, but if you do need to follow up, please feel free. And tomorrow is Friday, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the week and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.